Picture this. A scorching July day in 1187, two massive armies meet near a volcanic double hill in the Holy Land, a place known as the Horns of Hattin. By sunset, one of the most stunning military victories of the medieval world had completely shattered the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem and opened the road straight to the Holy City. Let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the cinematic, tragic, and honestly monumental events of July 4, 1187. Because, this isn't just a story of clashing swords, it is an absolute masterclass in strategy, logistics, and the devastating consequences of political infighting. What's absolutely staggering right off the bat is the geographical irony of all this. For centuries, the Horns of Hattin had actually been identified by many Christian communities as the Mount of Beatitudes. Yes, the very place where the Sermon on the Mount supposedly took place, a location fundamentally tied to the whole concept of peace. But on this particular summer weekend, this serene, dry scrubland morphed into a deadly trap for the greatest field army the Kingdom of Jerusalem had ever put together. The Mount literally bore witness to, well, not peace, but a sword.
So how did we even get to this point? The political escalation was incredibly rapid, pushing a deeply divided kingdom into a holy war they really couldn't afford. You see, by 1185, they actually had a 4-year truce in place between the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Ayyubid Sultanate, but the Crusader kingdom was just unraveling from the inside out. King Baldwin V died in 1186, Guy of Lusignan took the throne, and boom, major constitutional crisis. The real tipping point, though? A notorious Crusader lord named Reynold of Chatillon blatantly broke the truce by attacking a Muslim caravan. Saladin demanded restitution, King Guy couldn't, or maybe wouldn't, bring Reynold into line, and just like that, war became totally inevitable.
And this brings us to a stark contrast in leadership. Saladin had spent the previous decade systematically unifying Egypt and Syria. He forged this vast, incredibly disciplined coalition, all united under a single driving purpose. Then you have the Crusader leadership, which was, to put it mildly, an absolute mess. King Guy was constantly clashing with his own powerful vassals, especially Raymond of Tripoli. We're talking infighting, accusations of treason, and completely competing strategic visions. Honestly, their internal drama practically doomed the army before they even started marching.
The route from Safari to Hattin is where Saladin's brilliant strategic trap really springs shut. He deliberately besieged the town of Tiberias, knowing full well that Raymond of Tripoli's wife was trapped inside the citadel. It was pure bait. Now, Raymond actually advised the king to just let the town fall rather than risk their entire army out in the desert heat. But King Guy's rivals immediately accused him of cowardice. Stung by that, Guy caved and chose to march. It's a crazy reminder of how human arrogance and politics can just destroy you. He led his forces away from a perfectly safe, well-watered camp right into a grueling 15-mile trek across an arid plateau in the middle of a scorching Levantine July.
Out on that open plateau, the tactical mismatch was just lethal. The Crusaders relied heavily on the shock-and-awe charge of their armored knights. But to pull that off, those slow, heavy units absolutely needed constant protection from foot soldiers to keep enemy horses away. Saladin, on the flip side, brought in highly mobile Turkoman archers. These guys weren't looking for prolonged hand-to-hand combat. They used pure agility, retreating the second they were charged, and then immediately sweeping back in to harass, exhaust, and just pepper the Crusaders with arrows from a distance. Now, let's talk about the absolute most critical factor in medieval Middle Eastern warfare: water. The logistics here are mind-blowing and show exactly how fatal King Guy's decision was. Their starting point at Safori yielded over 100,000 liters of water per hour. That's plenty for thousands of men and horses. Their destination, Hattin, had decent water too, but Saladin's forces already held it. And the midpoint? Ang Turan. It offered a measly 180 liters per hour, basically a trickle. By marching past Safori, the Crusaders willingly walked straight into mass dehydration. Try to imagine the sheer nightmare of that environment. You've got thousands of men in heavy padded armor and chainmail, dragging incredibly thirsty warhorses, just choking on dry dust under a relentless sun. And Saladin played the psychological warfare game perfectly. He literally had camels bring fresh water up to his front lines, and his troops purposely poured it out on the ground just to taunt the agonizingly thirsty Franks. As if that wasn't enough, the Muslim forces set fire to the dry scrub brush. The wind picked up, blowing blinding, suffocating smoke straight into the Crusader ranks. Just brutal.
All of this built up to the final agonizing climax on the morning of July 4th. Driven completely mad by thirst, the Crusader infantry just lost it. They broke formation, scrambling up the hills in a desperate, chaotic search for water or some kind of defensible position. And that was the fatal blow. By abandoning their posts, they stripped the knights of all their infantry protection. Suddenly, the Crusaders' horses were systematically being shot out from under them. It triggered this chaotic series of final stands, with King Guy hastily throwing up his royal pavilion on the heights in a last-ditch effort to rally his breaking army.
Then comes Saladin's final, masterful move. Count Raymond of Tripoli realized the battle was lost, right? So he executes this desperate, unified cavalry charge to try and break out of the encirclement and escape toward the Sea of Galilee. But Saladin's commanders were totally ready for it. Using those mobile tactics, the Muslim forces simply parted. They literally opened a lane, let Raymond and his knights charge right through, and the second they were clear, the ranks snapped firmly shut again. Raymond got out, but the door was permanently slammed on King Guy and everyone else left behind. At that point, the collapse was absolute. Horses dead or dying, men utterly exhausted. The remnants of the Crusader army were squeezed tighter and tighter onto the horns. And then, the ultimate symbols of Crusader authority fell. The sacred True Cross, this massive relic brought into battle to inspire the troops, was captured. Shortly after that, King Guy's royal red tent was physically knocked to the ground. You know, in medieval warfare, the commander's tent falling is the universal signal that organized resistance is over. The greatest army of the Kingdom of Jerusalem was completely annihilated. The immediate aftermath inside Saladin's tent is straight out of a movie, a really striking mix of calculated mercy and absolute vengeance. The captive King Guy was handed a cup of iced water. In Arab culture, that was a profound symbol that his life was going to be spared. But when Guy took a drink and passed that same cup to Reynaud of Châtillon, the guy who broke the truce in the first place, Saladin stepped in. He had sworn a personal vow to kill Reynaud for his crimes against Muslim caravans. True to his word, Saladin struck Reynaud with his sword, and his guards finished the job, permanently removing the Crusaders' most aggressive wildcard from the board.
We really can't just chalk this stunning victory up to Crusader incompetence or bad geography. It was a massive testament to Saladin's superior military organization. He perfectly utilized the early Islamic five-part army structure, the Nizam al-Khamis. He had highly skilled cavalry in the vanguard harassing the enemy, a corps of foot soldiers holding the line, and critically, a dedicated rearguard managing transport and supplies. This meant that while the Crusaders were literally dying of thirst, Saladin's men were constantly getting fresh water and arrows throughout the entire grueling battle. Now, as historians, we always have to look at the sources, and it's fascinating how they differ on the exact final moments of the battle. For example, the Muslim chronicler Ibn al-Athir paints this dramatic picture of successive Frankish downhill cavalry charges that were barely pushed back. But then you have Imad al-Din, who was actually an eyewitness, noting that the Franks had already lost their horses and were fighting on foot. Meanwhile, Latin sources talk about uncoordinated early attacks by the Templars. But even with these debated details, the unified consensus across every single source is the absolute devastation of the Crusader force.
The geopolitical fallout from Hattin? Absolutely earth-shattering. By wiping out the kingdom's main field army, Saladin left the Crusader castles and cities practically undefended. Within months, major coastal cities just fell without a fight. And the ultimate prize, Jerusalem, surrendered to Saladin on October 2nd, 1187, ending 88 years of Christian rule. The shockwaves of this loss hit Europe so hard that it prompted the Pope to launch the legendary Third Crusade, pulling heavy hitters like Richard the Lionheart directly into the Levant.
If you visit the Horns of Hattin today, the landscape is remarkably preserved. It's this quiet, grassy volcanic plateau that looks almost exactly like it did over 8 centuries ago. It's an incredible archaeological window into the past, holding the memory of a single sweltering afternoon that completely reshaped the history of the Middle East and changed the dynamic between civilizations for generations. I want to leave you with a massive what if as we wrap up this explainer. In war, logistics and geography are often just as deadly as the enemy. What if King Guy had managed his fractured lords, swallowed his pride, and just stayed put at the well-watered springs of Sephori? If he hadn't marched into that sun-baked desert, Saladin's massive coalition might have fractured over time. The Crusader kingdom might have survived. Would the map of the modern world look entirely different today? It's a wild thought. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning history, and we'll catch you next time.